Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Hello to folks that are either listening to the live stream or that are listening to this on the archive of wherever you are finding this. My name is Kirk Rea and I am a co-executive director of a placemaking nonprofit called the Sea Repair Project here in Portland, Oregon. Or Also, this is the indigenous land of the Chinook, the Multnomah, the Clackamas, and many other tribes named and unnamed, which is important for us to say because as a placemaking organization, we help folks do street paintings and install gardens, earthen buildings. Placemaking is great, but a lot of it's new, and all that to say, there have been people here for time immemorial. So we like to acknowledge whose land we are on. We are right now on day 3 of an annual event that the City Repair Project puts on called the Village Building Convergence, which normally we help communities, dozens of communities over a 10-day span, install a bunch of placemaking projects, street paintings, gardens, earthen buildings, et cetera. None of that happening this year, but also part of this 10-day festival called the Village Building Convergence, we always have events like this teach-in where we gather together, or in pandemic times, live stream, shout, pew, 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 around the globe, pew, 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 pew. And we have teach-ins, workshops, community conversations to talk about placemaking and its and various intersectionality. And with this Village Building Convergence, our theme is, oh gosh, I always mess up the verbs because there's 3 of them. It's justice in healing and learning. And many of our events are looking at racial justice, housing justice, food justice, and so we're very excited for the content for today. This weekend of events, there have been 2 so far, have been a collaborative of many organizations, which I'll introduce some folks in just a minute. But before we get to our organizer partners for this event, we want to say that this event is kindly sponsored by Southeast Uplift.
There it is.
Both through a grant that we've received that in part pays for this programming, but also where we're sitting with this lovely sun beaming down upon us, and maybe you hear some singing and some crows in the background. A baby, I'm hearing a baby right now. All the things.
And baby crows.
And everyone is welcome. So we are sitting in a parking lot, a parklet at the Southeast Uplift building, which is where we were also last night. So thank you for giving us space to safely gather outside to be here for this event and to have since this is kind of like, we'll be becoming a podcast instead of being in a stuffy room, like you in your room, me in my room, and all the doors shut. It's like, oh, we can hear the babies and the crows and all the peeps. So thank you, Southeast Uplift. Also, thank you to Oregon Humanities, the Metro Placemaking Department, and the Parks in Portland Foundation, or the Portland Parks Foundation. Thank you, sponsors.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to have Julia come up to introduce People for Mutual Education, who is also helping put this event on. And then after Julia, we'll hear from master artist Michael Bernard Stevenson Jr., and then we'll get into our panel.
Thank you so much. Love it. I felt like I wanted to lay on this carpet. So my name is Julia. I'm a bunny, and I'm part of People for Mutual Education, and we are a collective of humans living in the greater Portland area. And together what we do is curate educational resources. Like, Michael, you want to hand me one of those so I can be like, ooh, ah, damn foosball. So something like this, if you've seen a pamphlet with some beautiful art on one side, and then some, I don't know if y'all can see it, many words, many accessible words. I'm sorry, we also consist of dogs, so humans and dogs. Yes. And so we create these educational materials as well as curate educational spaces such as this teach-in and many other events where we just get together as people and talk about the world that we want to create together, specifically towards anti-racism and redistributing resources, materials, and wealth. Is there anything that we want to add to that? We're a group of white folks, BIPOC folks, and that is a very challenging and beautiful thing where we're coming together and trying to just continue making community. I'm gonna step aside.
Yes, thanks, Julia and Kirk, and all of the organizations supporting us being in this moment. And again, thinking about all of these things, all these different supports that get to kind of filter something into an archive is exciting. That will have a future life. And so that's for Buddy, the editor. But now all of those things are kind of propping up and featuring. Also, another platform we're using is Tin Can Phone. This is now the Tin Can Phone podcast. And as part of that group, a prison-based podcast organization, we've invited friend collaborator Blue to be supported by People for Mutual Education to make these pamphlets, which are available at, what is our website? P4me.tumblr.com. We should use some of that money to invest in a domain name. But in support of Blue and the different circumstances surrounding Blue's context, we created a pamphlet about the non-unanimous jury convictions, and now Blue will use the Tin Can Phone platform to talk about that with his guests. So Blue, take it away.
Nice. Hi, I am the community manager over at Art Design Exchange in Portland, and I'm here to kind of bring awareness through some awesome resources, not only an amazing team that we got together to work on this pamphlet that did just a beautiful job that we will then give out to the world and try to help people sort of understand what this issue is. But we also have Eliza Kaplan, who is kind of like the leader of this fight within the legal realm. So we have this grassroots swell that we're trying to create, which she's a part of. And then as we fight through the legislation, she's kind of leading the battle and supporting people and advocating for people in that area. And I've had some great talks with her in the past. She was on one of our IGTV shows for Art V, our live art show at ADX. But really what this is about just sharing information that I think when anybody hears it, they get it, that it's not right, and they get that it's not fair. And we're going to try to give you a little bit more context and understanding. And we have our other guest here as well.
We're on the video here.
Thank you so much.
How you doing?
Terrence. So this is Terence Hayes, and he's had an experience with this Ramos issue and with the entire subject, and he'll be able to share his story as well. Thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So I guess just to throw it out there.
On public television.
Yeah. We are live on IGTV.
No pressure, right?
That's right.
No pressure. Act natural, right?
We're live on IGTV for ADX, and I hope the followers are engaging. You feel free to invite people if you want. And also with Tin Can Phone, we had an amazing time with Tin Can Phone last night talking about their first season. They got like a big placemaking grant, and they're doing the same podcast that they did on the inside, and now they're doing it on the outside and trying to raise awareness and just show people like, hey, we are just human beings, and like welcome us back.
Right, no, absolutely.
And welcome other people back and like see us and hear us. So Eliza, can you just kind of give us a framework for what we're talking about in terms of the Ramos decision, what that is?
Sure. So Oregon since where am I looking? Where do you want me to look?
I think we'll look at this.
You just look.
And I mean,
Okay.
You should all just interact
Okay. I'm
naturally.
gonna like back up a little.
Okay. anything.
I'm gonna back up a little.
It's a radio show.
I know.
With a camera. I know. That's why I said you can see yourself. So
Yeah,
you
so
know,
it feels
yeah,
funny,
sorry,
right?
boy. Yeah, well,
Okay, so in 1934, Oregon had a legislative referral that the people voted and put on the books in our constitution, our state constitution, a provision that says we can have non-unanimous juries, meaning in felony cases, so serious cases, that if a jury, we all think of it as being 12, but really what we did was we added this provision that said 10 is enough, 10 of 12 is enough, 11 out of 12 is enough, and that we could convict people based on the split jury verdict. And the only other state that had this at the time, louder, the only other state that had this at the time was Louisiana. They had it beginning in the late 1800s. And just a little background, and no other state has ever had it. It's just Louisiana and then Oregon. When Louisiana's law went into effect, it was a reaction to slavery ending, and it was clearly documented as a way to have Black people go to prison, convict more people, and then have them do the work that former slaves did. And it's fully documented. And then a bunch of years later, in the early 30s, in the late 30s, no, in the early 30s here in Oregon, our law was created and based in discrimination as well. And ours was following about a 10-year humongous rise of the KKK in Oregon through the 1920s. There were also, that was happening. And then at the same time, there were a lot of immigrants coming in from Italy, from Eastern Europe, mostly Catholics and Jews. And so the combination of these two things kind of all came together in the early 30s during a very big trial that took place of a Jewish man, a gangster, Jewish gangster, those existed back then. And, and it was a trial for murder, and the jury couldn't reach an opinion. And the news, the media at the time, the newspapers, right, followed every single aspect of this case. It was huge, and there were tons of papers throughout the Portland and Columbia County areas, but also around the state, that talked about our jury system. And paper after paper, especially what is today the Oregonian, editorialized with tons of xenophobic comments and racist comments. And it just built up to a head that when this jury could not convict this man of murder, they settled on a lesser charge and a fine, and people kind of lost it. And it led just a few months later to a special election where we put into our constitution this provision of non-unanimous juries for conviction. And we became the second state in the country to put this horrible law in place. And it lasted for 85 plus years until April 20th, what year is it? 2020. So just a year ago, the United States Supreme Court finally struck down the horrible racist law. It's important to know that Louisiana on their own, through a referral, had already gotten rid of the law a couple years earlier. But here in Oregon, we were still using. And so the Ramos versus Louisiana came down in April 2020, and it made it so every single case going forward in any state, but here in Oregon was the only one using this horrible law, that we can no longer convict anyone of a non-unanimous jury.
So I guess the fight's over.
The fight is not over. And, what's really interesting about it's legal stuff, right? So legal stuff says, okay, we changed the law. The US Supreme Court said this horrible law is discriminatory. The US Supreme Court, every justice that addressed the history of this rule also was very clear that this law was, both laws in both states were based in discrimination, were about perpetuating white supremacy and xenophobia. And numerous justices in their opinions wrote about this history. And yet, even though we know this practice is unconstitutional based on numerous legal theories, and that it was, everyone agrees it's discriminatory, the law says we change the law and you move forward. So anyone going forward, or anyone who still had like they were convicted of a non-unanimous jury, but were still in their what we call direct appeals, their first round of appeals. And then going forward, we cannot use this law. So about 400 folks were in this process. They get automatically went back to the beginning, vacated, we call it, back to the district attorney in their circuit courts, in their counties, and the district attorney can decide, am I going to retry them? Am I not going to retry them? So that's automatic. And then going forward. But what the law doesn't automatically allow under Ramos, even though we know unconstitutionality, we know discriminatory intent, it doesn't go backwards. So obviously we had the law for 85 plus years. There's got to be a lot of people that were convicted with non-unanimous juries. And what about them? And that's why the fight continues, because on so many levels, if we don't give justice and a right to what I always say, a do-over, basically anyone who can prove that they had a non-unanimous jury should be able to say, my conviction is unconstitutional, and I get to go back, and the DA can look at my case again and make a decision about what they want to do. And that is the only way to, one, offer, what's fair and just to the people who have these non-unanimous jury convictions. But also, if we're ever going to have any belief in our justice system moving forward for every people, for all people in every context, we have to do the work to dismantle, the wrongs of the past and the injustice of the past and the racism of the past. If we don't do that, then what are we saying to everybody going forward? Okay, you don't have a non-unanimous jury, but there'll be something else, right? If you don't take responsibility for the past injustice and do what's right, then you're not really fixing the problem, right? And so even though that opinion came out a year ago, we have a few hundred people that have filed cases, claims in a type of legal action called post-conviction relief. And those people are saying, hey, apply this retroactively to me so I can get my justice and my constitutional right to a fair trial. And we are in that right now. And that's been over a year. And then the Supreme Court, was that just last week? 2 weeks ago, feels like 100 years right now, but just 2 weeks ago, the US Supreme Court chimed in again, and they said, under federal law, we don't think this Ramos versus Louisiana should be retroactive. And they apply a test. They went so far to say that it doesn't apply, that they got rid of their entire test. Yeah, so they had this test on the books for years saying, oh, we can use this test to find retroactivity, and they never use it. And here's this perfect case that fits exactly into their legal test. And rather than grant retroactivity for a few hundred people in Oregon and what they think is about 1,500 people in Louisiana, to give them the justice they deserve, they just said, forget it, nothing's ever going to be retroactive again. They got rid of the entire test. The good news, however, is that that was under federal law. So we still have hope here in Oregon, because we're going to bring this all the way to the Oregon Supreme Court, and they're not obligated to follow that second court ruling called Edwards versus Benoit. They're not obligated to follow. In fact, in Edwards, the Supreme Court says in footnote 6, carefully read, right, opinion, says states, you can apply whatever retroactivity test you want. This is just what we think under federal law. Under state law, go do what you want. So all these people that have been filing over the last year, it feels really bad, because it feels like this highest court should have done the right thing. I don't know why we think they should do the right thing, because they rarely do the right thing for marginalized communities, right? Never mind defendants, and people who are incarcerated, and Black people, and I could go on. they rarely do the right thing, especially the current very conservative court. But it feels really bad to all of us, right? Those affected and also those that do the work on the legal side. But we've never argued in all of these cases over the last year, we've never argued that we're counting on that. We've always argued that Oregon should take care of Oregon. And our Oregon courts should not just follow that blindly. They should look at all of the people affected by this and let them tell them that they don't deserve, right? Let's make our court decide this issue. And that's where we are. So we're filing away. We're not spending too much focus on Edwards. It was expected. And we're just moving forward with these cases. And here's the extra piece. The extra piece is that our Attorney General, Ellen Rosenblum, has argued even though she says publicly this is a racist and discriminatory law and it's terrible for Oregon and all that, she still filed a brief in support of Louisiana in Ramos versus Louisiana, basically arguing that we shouldn't get rid of non-unanimous juries. And then in Edwards versus Benoit, this retroactivity ruling, she argued that it shouldn't be retroactive. So here she is, the respondent in most of these post-conviction cases, right? And she has another opportunity to do the right thing, which she hasn't done yet, for Oregonians and for their rights, right? And for a fair, just legal system. And she is the respondent in all of these cases. She could stipulate retroactivity. She could not fight the retroactivity part of people's claims. And basically for the last year, every single case she has fought on retroactivity grounds and also on other legal procedural grounds. Her office is doing everything in her power to not let these cases proceed. And that's where we are. And, you know, it would be great if she got on board. It would be great if she practiced what she preaches. It would be great if she stopped hiding behind the law. And it would be great if she used her leadership. She's an elected official. And it would be great if she didn't just do what she's told and actually took on the responsibility of joining what, you know, what should be an easy ask as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you,
That's
Elisa.
where we are.
That's
Phew.
amazing. That's the whole, that could be the whole thing. It's
That's it.
beautiful, but we have
Great.
more. And
Thanks.
I just want to bring up a few things. I mean, it's an already problematic system with 12 acts, right? It already does damage. We have innocence projects all over the country who find people and get them out based on erroneous convictions when it's a unanimous jury. This is even more problematic. And it's exacerbated by some other things in Oregon that I'm not going to go into, but I think it's amazing to see. I'll never forget this guy, Strom Thurmond, became like liberal, you know, like he was like the most conservative guy in the world. And then he kind of like, he pivoted, like Ellen could change.
She's
do
also
this.
progressive.
Yeah, she does.
She's
the right
been a
thing
leader
sometimes.
against Donald Trump nationally. She brought everyone together. She's,
Yeah.
you know, she claims that's her agenda. And yet on something that, you know, to be the leader and fight against Donald Trump's policy, that doesn't take courage. You know, this takes a little courage. And that we're not seeing, you know, to be a little bit more nuanced and a little bit more, I don't know, like really looking at the issue and the cases and the people affected. People don't want a free get out of jail card. They just want a fair process.
Yeah. And
I have a
yeah, Michael.
curiosity because I think in the culture concept of tin can phone, prisons is a for-profit industry, and so the systems, a lot of the systems we're discussing is like that they're in place for a reason. And in fact, like you described in Louisiana originally, essentially to replace the abolition of slavery. So, and I am learning in this moment from you, and I'm curious, like what is the political motive that you could surmise?
Yeah.
You seem to have more details.
You know, what's really interesting is I moved here about 10 years ago, and I remember learning about this law. And I've practiced in many, many states in my career, and I could not believe this law existed. As a criminal defense lawyer, or anyone who does anything in criminal law, if two people on your jury thinks that the government didn't prove their case, or one person, or they think you're innocent, yet I mean, that sounds like reasonable doubt to me, right? So, when I first moved here and learned that, I was like, put that on my list. I need to figure this out. I need to understand what this is, right? And that's a lot of how I approach issues, I guess, because I'm an academic and a practitioner. So I'm always like, what's the history? How did this happen? How do we get here? To me, those are really important questions to ask. And so I did the research and found out the history of this law. No one ever here did that. And it wasn't that hard, right? It was all in the voter pamphlet and the newspaper over the year before. It was right there. And I think that in general, so I say all that to preface that I think this issue is like so many in Oregon. And again, I've only been here 10 years, but what I see is a place that wants to say that they care deeply about racial justice and it's progressive and all that stuff. And there is a lot of that. But I think that there's a real lack of interest in really, really going deep and talking about the issues and talking about our horrible, horrible history. This state has such a horrible white supremacist history. And it certainly has come out more in different ways over the last few years, but there's a culture of not talking about stuff on all sorts of issues, but especially people are uncomfortable. And, maybe because I'm a New York City girl and I just showed up and I was like, what the hell is going on here? Sometimes maybe it takes, outsiders to come in, become insiders and push issues. So if that's, what I did on this, and I'm really proud of that. But I also feel like, so there's that whole, we don't like to deal with this stuff. I think that's more than political. I think, we're seeing more over the last year an interest like for politicians to talk about these issues, but still there's a real lacking in really the nuance and the depth of talking about racial justice issues. And I hope we get better on that on all fronts, right? In all parts of our society and culture here. And I guess the other part of it, and I'll just tell you what the Attorney General says, and she's not wrong, right? If we go back and look at, a few hundred cases of past convictions, what is it going to do? Is it going to cost a little money? Absolutely. It's going to cost money. And we just came out of COVID and all the courts are backed up, and that's part of it too. There's all these practical things, money, time, the courts are clogged, etc. Right? So there's those issues, and those are real, right? There's also a lot of cases that the evidence is so old that it's not going to be found, and then what will happen, right? And then third are the victims involved in cases, right? Well, that's huge, right? This is going to affect victims who thought that their cases and their situations were settled and done, right? And so, what I say to those things is yes, yes, and yes. That is true. There is no doubt about that. However, that doesn't excuse, not addressing these issues. Yeah, it's going to be hard for everyone. And the people with non-unanimous convictions, it has affected their lives and their families. And people have been in prison and not seen their kids grow up and missed so many aspects of the lives that all of us take for granted because they had a non-unanimous jury conviction. And if their case was any other place besides Oregon or Louisiana, they would not have been convicted, right? And it's just too easy to like blame it on, these practical or evidentiary or victims. I've done a ton of innocence work as a lawyer, and I've never met a victim in a case who didn't want the truth and didn't want fairness and justice in their trial. So I think it's a little bit hiding behind some of these issues. The victim community is not a monolith. They have all different views and opinions, and it's really important that we don't not justice because of practical issues, and yes, because it's going to be too upsetting. Well, it's pretty upsetting that we've imprisoned hundreds and hundreds of people and ruin their lives based on a non-unanimous jury conviction. It's not a competition. These are issues that affect people on all parts of the criminal justice system, but it doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do.
Thanks, Elisa. It's heartbreaking, honestly. And I want to give Terrence the next chance to speak, but I just want to I guess, identify, I don't know, it's scary. It's really terrifying to think that people would put pragmatism in front of what's right.
And your lives.
Yeah, we looked into the numbers, and we found that if we took the 300 cases that have been filed, or 300,
It's even
approximately,
less.
it's less than 300 cases in Oregon, and we were to look at what percentage of the total number of cases brought each year, that it would be about 1.5%. So this idea of this stress, especially since we're talking about deals sometimes, and sometimes retrials, or sometimes just letting somebody go.
Because they've served all their
Right.
time.
We have
Yeah.
people that have served all their time. So what's really going on, and we might not know, but we do know that, I think also about what you said about having the conversation. That's what we're doing here. And I think the people watching through ADX and the people who are watching through Tin Can Phone, you are the people who we need. And you'll tell somebody else, and maybe they'll tell somebody else. But I believe that Portlanders are ready to have the conversation. I don't think it's that people don't want to have the conversation, or don't want to like embrace these human beings and say, come back and be a part of this community, or we don't want you. I don't think that's Portland. Like, I really don't. I think,
Or
and I know this is
Oregon,
about
or
Oregon
anywhere
in
in the whole
general. Yeah,
state.
anywhere in Oregon. I think we're ready to say, let's restore people. Let's give people a chance to be a part of this society, and welcome people back. And I just think that's really important. So anybody who's watching, that's the stance from which I'm looking at this entire thing. Terrence, thank you so much for coming. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. Do you want to just share a little bit about your experience with this issue?
Yeah. So in 2000, oh, and did the dog, I think. So in 2004, I was convicted of a non-unanimous jury decision, and interestingly enough, by Ellen Rosenblum. So my story is unique in that the same person that we're asking to fix it is the same person that I preserved the issue on the trial level, and she rejected it. Right. So when people ask questions about why, she has to answer for the part she's played in that. Right. She's not been our attorney general the whole time and being able to say, hey, I'm just going to do what the law says. She has actually participated in offending people, and we don't know what number. Right. No, I don't think nobody stopped and said how many people can sign her off as a trial judge. And so for me to go through that process, actually even on the trial level, preserve the issue, I remember the way she responded to it. Almost like, we know this is going to be an issue one day, but today it's not, right? The law is still on my side. So, I mean, me and my wife was talking about it, like, she remembers when my lawyer argued it, and she was like, well, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but today I won't be the person that touched it, right? And so she is still taking that position, and now she knows how it turned out. She understands that the history, and she's an intelligent woman. So I believe, as a judge, she knew the history then. She don't take me as a woman who missed much, right? Really intelligent, really aware. But I think that politicians do what politicians do, right? And I think now she's been able to hide on the progressive side from an Oregon standpoint historically, and now she's in a little bit of trouble. And so I went and I did 13 years under that. I continue to fight that and continue to get rejected in the courts. I continue to preserve my issues, and now the Supreme Court, along with our Attorney General, is saying that don't matter, right? And for me, it is really personal, not just because I did the time, but because she was the judge, right? And so when I plead to her to rectify the offense, it's because she was my offender. She was the person that offended me legally, and now she is refusing to touch it, right? She's now hiding behind her position. So when we talk about Oregonians and all that doing the right thing, she is a voting official, right? And until Portlandians especially stand up and say, well, this is the county she came out of, these are the people she offended, and we're not going to stand for that, and we're going to press her until she honors and does what right, I think we're in trouble, right? I mean, my story, it's prototypical for me. That decision that those guys made 100 years ago, right, 70 years ago, intentionally for individuals like me, she continued to honor those decisions in her power, and even now she does. So when I look at it, it's just ridiculous for me, right? And so now my call is to Oregonians to do something, right? We take to the streets every time these type of offenses happen or police kill a young black man. We take to the streets. Do y'all not understand that the lives of young black men have been lost through that decision? I went in jail at 20. I came home at 33. I wasn't the same person, right? And she had the total ability to do what was right then and refused to, and can do it now. Now she has an opportunity to give me a shot to do this in a fair manner, and she still refuses. Still considering my life not worth the stroke of a pen. And at the end of the day, y'all, that's what it is. I don't, we do talk about, and out of all those things you listed, I care about the victims because I care about the stress and the trauma that will be associated. But I was a victim also.
Yeah.
Right. And I have to be included in that conversation. And to not be included, people often ask, well, I see stuff all the time after I do this, like, did you do it? We're not even talking about guilt and innocence. We're talking about constitutionality. Did they have a right to convict me? And if, like you said, if a victim wants justice, then they have to want it on all ends of that spectrum, right? Absolutely. They have to want to make sure that I was properly convicted, that the state who bear the burden to prove my guilt did their jobs correctly and didn't rely on a racist legal law. And that's what they did, right? At the end of the day, you have hundreds of people in Oregon that was convicted under a law that was intentionally racist, and we are doing nothing about it. So it's not just a call to her, it's a call to us who vote her in, right? Where Portland goes, Oregon goes. Let's just be real about that, right? Where Portland goes, Oregon goes. And so when I see Black Lives Matter signs and I see restorative justice, I also see that people are overlooking some of the most horrific parts of that offense, right? My life does not matter at this moment, in my opinion, to Judge Rosenblum. And she may disagree with that, but she has the power to restore my life to at least record rise, to restore it to a sense of justice and righteousness, and she's choosing not to do that.
And so you said once when we were speaking together, and it sticks in my head always, that like racism isn't just, people KKK wearing their white hats. It's like, this is deep in, and this is the stuff that people don't want to deal with. Right. But it's just as bad, and especially because you can't see it in the same way.
Right. Absolutely.
It's so
I agree.
True.
And that's why I say Oregonians and Portlandians, right? Because ultimately your foremothers and forefathers voted this stuff, right? And now you have the responsibility to demand justice for the people that they voted in to offend, right? It is totally within the voters' power and our legislative power and our judicial to rectify this. But you guys actually control all that, right? You control every aspect of that through y'all voice and through y'all vote. And I think that if Oregonians decide that this atrocity must be rectified, then she'll pay a lot more attention, right? The people have to demand. When we was done with Trump, we took to the streets to get rid of Trump, right? Now we see the same behavior legally and publicly, and we're not taking to the streets about it. We're not demanding change. And for me, it is discouraging when Oregon knows its racist history. You guys are here doing all the work to change it, and this one is quietly being ignored. And it's one of the most horrific ones, right? You have generations of young Black men, and extremely the BIPOC community, I think in particular, that took deals, and they could have been totally innocent, but they knew all it took was 10. And when they looked at that jury, 12 didn't look like that.
And sadly, we never kept any records.
Right.
And so, the numbers actually of people who are filing is really low. And so that should make it even easier for her, right? Or courts or whoever. But it also shows you how much we did not want to deal with this, that we didn't keep record. When I started researching this, I was like, okay, we're going to go through all of the records from the beginning, and we're going to see how many people at least had a non-unanimous jury conviction. We'll never know the numbers who pled, right? Never. But maybe we can at least get the numbers. And I learned very quickly there's no way to tell, because there was no requirement that we poll a jury. There was no requirement that we kept statistics on this. In Louisiana, they always kept it. So they have amazing data. and they could prove in 10 seconds how racist the law applied, over all their years. Right. We can never do that.
In Louisiana, 80% of the population that is filed under non-unanimous juries is Black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they have different demographics.
Right.
So, but
But
they're
I think it's important to
Yeah.
identify that Terence was talking about the fact that this has racist origins, that's what we've been talking about, but it's also paid dividends. Like it's done exactly what it was meant to do.
exactly.
And we have
both,
the numbers.
in both states.
Right.
This law has done exactly what was intended.
Right.
Both, and Oregon's demographics make it even more interesting. So not only have we convicted people, right, in a disproportionate way, just based on our, demographics alone, but we've also said to jurors, I mean, if I was on a jury, right, I'm a white woman, if I was on a jury and my voice didn't count, I would be out of my mind, right? Imagine if you're the one person on a jury who's a person of color, and that's normal, even in Multnomah County, right, where that's our most diverse population. The likelihood of you having one person, especially historically, right, on your jury is slim. And then imagine if that person or those two people's voices are the ones that don't count. So this law not only played out exactly as planned for defendants of color, right? It also played out exactly as planned here in Oregon with our demographics to jurors of color. And, it's like, there's no excusing it. There's just no excusing it. And we have no real record. So all we have are the people who have been filing, and the numbers are really low. And as Terence said, do you know how many young Black men probably agreed to a plea deal because their lawyer said to them, you don't have a chance. We only need 10. And you're never going to get 10. And already we plea 97% of all of our cases. And then that happened over 97%. And over. Yeah, and that already happened. That happened to so many. I hear stories all the time. I'm sure you do. That all the time of people, but like, how are they even going to prove that? Right? So when we look at, there's those, and that's probably tons of people, right? And they'll never be able to prove it. And they should bring their cases. They should bring their cases and see what they can do. But then we have under 300 people, right, that have filed that can prove it. That's it, right? Well, if we allow retroactivity over the next year, there's a 2-year filing deadline from Ramos. So we have less than another year. That's just post-conviction, right? We have less than one more year. Let's say another 200 people, which is not going to happen. But my office is the one keeping all the numbers and watching all of these cases. There's no way there's going to be that many more. But let's say there are. We're still less than 500 people. Who cares? Really the numbers are really low.
I really appreciated when you sent me some of the demographics and seeing like 6% of Multnomah County is
Yep.
Black, and 34 or 38%, something around there.
So basically we did the numbers, we did the race numbers for all those 400 people that were on direct appeal. So they automatically got Ramos protection. They went back. And we did the demographics on the less than 300 people that have filed post-conviction. And in those, it's not scientific because we can't go back and do a sampling and all that. But basically in the 400 and the 300, it's disproportionately against people of color, Blacks, Latinos, Native Americans,
and not in like a subtle way, like in a ridiculously brutal way.
And by the way, that makes sense because we already have studies in Oregon that show that at every single stage of the criminal justice system, from arrest to sentencing, we disproportionately sentence, arrest, everything, right? Every single aspect, that we have a different system for people of color than we do for white people. And that there was a huge study in Multnomah County just 3 years ago that looked at every single thing. There was a huge study in 1994 of the state, every single thing. And I was reading that 1994 report the other day. for something I was working on, and I read it before, and I just read it, and I was like, oh my God, this says this is what we need to do, and we did nothing, And then the 2016 report came out about Multnomah County. It said this is all the things we should do, and we've done very little. So this is part of this a larger system, and let's not forget that. I mean, even though I don't have the scientific numbers, I have no doubt.
I mean, that's something I wanted to bring up is that the platform of People for Mutual Education is essentially like vividly aware that all of these systems are specifically are racist, anti-Black,
Yep.
And anti-Semitic and other things, anti-people of color, and like the discrimination is becoming more and more visible in my lifetime, especially like culminating with like a Trump presidency. And even in the Biden presidency, we also see that like a more a facade that is still rejecting things, but not out of handling. And so we're aware that these systems are in place in a way that were designed specifically, and then we're using both the platform of People for Mutual Education and Tin Can Phone to try to unmake them because we understand that they exist in that way. So I just wanted to raise that up, and you kind of concluded with that. And as Terence kind of called the public into play, and that's again the design of these platforms is to reach a public, because that's the struggle for me and in my work is that these things are not just happening, they're all conscious decisions, and they were based on clear and identifiable problematic platforms. And as you, Ellen, mentioned, or that you mentioned about the kind of situation with Ellen, is that there is an intentional choice not to engage it. And so I wanted to, for the archive of Tin Can Phone, to ask Terence, because I know a little bit about Blue's experience of what it really means. So even that you served your time, and for me as the process was like, I see how it continues to influence a life after. And so you don't, and that's like a part of the work that occurs with Tin Can Phone, is that the incarceration never ends actually. Right. And so I'm curious if there is not something worth sharing so people can hear what it really means, that it's like, well, isn't it over already? Right. So what does that mean for you?
So first of all, it's never over, right? Even for me, if she was to rectify it and do what's right and put me back in, I would still have another set of fight. So when this first happened and Elisa reached out to me, she's like, look, you got to get your post-conviction in, right? So when we had built another relationship on some other stuff, she was on me, and then there was high levels of anxiety and stress for me, right? And I would even tell my wife, like, I need help. This is simple paperwork, right? She sent me the paperwork and like, how to do it, Terence, when to do it, Terence, where you go from here, how we gonna help you, call me if you need me. And I had high levels of anxiety, right? Because what it felt like is I was starting that process again, and I was gonna be disappointed. And eventually the Supreme Court didn't disappoint, but I was still disappointed, right? And
I spoke to both of you that day.
Right. Just like, when does it end? And so when I look at that, no, it would never end, right? Because I was still, there's so many injustices, especially in the criminal justice system, right? We will continue to fight, and I'll continue to be a part of that. But no, I mean, listen, I lost 13 years, right? I came home, I left, my daughter was 2, I came back, she was 15. Right, I mean, you're talking about a young lady. I'm hella not equipped to be a father to a teenage girl. Okay, they still kicking my tail.
No one is.
Right, I'm not ready for this. Right, I'm still getting my butt kicked today. Actually, I got my butt kicked today by 3 of them. So I didn't have the chance to grow. Right, and so it does. I don't have to strike the box after this, and that's important because I can't. My family is always at a disadvantage. No matter how much money I make, when we go for a home, I have to strike a box. And what that box means is they automatically can make a decision about whether I'm trustworthy enough not to pay the rent, but whether or not I'm welcome in certain communities. And let's be honest about that. Certain communities welcome my felony because I'm allowed to exist there. But most communities that are safe with good school districts, pretty much white communities, I'm not allowed there. And that's how they continue to keep me out. So when we talk about gentrification of Portland, I can't go back in those communities and live, as everybody say they're trying to get me back into those communities. That felony doesn't allow me back into those communities because they would automatically say, well, you're a violent criminal. I can't risk this is my community though. This was our community before white people decide that they liked it the homes in, right? And so this keeping me from at least dealing with the felony aspect doesn't even allow me back into the community that was taken from me. It doesn't even allow me to affect that community or to empower people like myself to get back into that community. When I'm not allowed, I mean, real estate builds wealth, right? I'm not allowed back into a community that's growing. Real estate numbers are growing high, some of the highest in the nation. So it's a wealth issue, right? I'm allowed to tap into the wealth of real estate because of that. Even when you talk about loans, right? Whether it's bank or private, I'm a felon, right? And all that plays a part in how they deal with me and how they deal with my family, right? My
And let
children
me
have to
just
answer
say
for that.
again, this is exactly what was planned.
Right, it worked perfectly.
I mean, it's this and so many other parts of our criminal justice system. This is what this was intended, right? And all over this country, that's true. I mean, it's not just this non-unanimous jury issue. It's like people have convictions, it stays with them forever.
Right.
You're always in prison. And like, let's not forget that you spent 13 years in prison, which is a trauma,
Right.
right? I mean,
Right.
it's, yeah.
It's crazy because work, even jobs, right? I can't get on. I'm an electrician by trade. I can't go to some of the best prevailing wages job if they're federally funded or in intel in certain areas, right? No matter how high my skill set is,
Right.
that felony stops me from those things too. So all the things that's supposed to be amazing about Portland, I am actually not allowed access to those things because I was wronged in the criminal justice system. And so, and then I did my time, right?
Yeah,
so if you
done.
talk about what about
Stop
the victim,
punishing.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Right.
Stop punishing.
If I am guilty, then my victim has gotten what was right and due as far as time goes,
Right.
and I'm home no matter what. They didn't they gave me the maximum amount of time. She didn't show any leniency towards me. She was not kind and patient towards me, right? She didn't see a 19, fresh on 20-year-old kid who made a mistake, right? She just seen a black kid that allowed her to roast. So when you talk about how deep it is, those are things that if she had to talk to me, she would have to answer for, right? And at this stage, it's not important. Just do what you can do. You can't go back and give me my time, but you can give me and my family the ability to just move on in a reasonably normal fashion. So and listen, I'm not their worst, right? I've really been blessed, and I still came home with a trade. I still work. I still been able to provide a decent life for my family. Imagine people who can't even do that.
Right.
Imagine individuals that don't have a wife supporting them, that don't have family because that conviction lost them everything.
And that's a lot.
Right. So a lot of people that didn't come home after those many years with family. Some people came home and didn't have family, right? I lost 2 cousins in my age group while I was incarcerated that I was never allowed to grow with and then mourn them in a proper way. So the totality of my life is affected. And again, the people have the ability, the lawmakers have the ability, and especially Judge Rosenblum has the ability to rectify this. And I just don't buy into the overwhelming of the courts, right? That, when we as a community decide that doesn't matter, then the lawmakers will find a way to fix it, right?
And
They'll
the
find a
truth
way to
is,
process it.
the county that has the most cases is Multnomah.
Right.
I mean, I have it all broken down, and some counties have like 2 cases.
Right.
I mean, most of them just have a few. And then Multnomah has the most, and I have no doubt that our new district attorney
Absolutely.
can and will handle this. And I don't think he's ever said he couldn't either.
No.
So I feel like,
Right.
but even not, like,
Right.
it's his job. He'll do it.
he'll
They'll
do it.
find a way. You know what I mean? It's like, that's your job. Do it. Sometimes I have a ton of work and I have to work 20 hours a day for months and months, and I do. And that's just it. They get paid really well in the DA's offices, and if this is thrown on them, then they'll figure it out.
And again, he's an elected official.
Yes,
It's his job.
exactly.
So I'm not
Exactly.
sympathetic for people to have to do their
No.
job. I have to go to work
Right.
9-10 hours a day and do my job.
Exactly.
And
It's part of
they
your
would have to
job.
do
That's
theirs.
all it would be.
Right. You pay taxes so they can do their job.
right.
And so we don't have to, the system is not real.
And
My
honestly,
life is real.
She's
right.
complaining about it, but I haven't heard from
One
any
DA.
DAs.
Especially not ours. I haven't
Yeah,
heard
but
them
also in
complain
the
about
other
it.
places, I think they're staying out of this one because, and when we were at a place where we might have had before Ramos was taken up by the Supreme Court, we had the DA Association was on board for referral, and we're very pro getting rid of this. So
Thank you. I just wanted to add a few things. There's trauma that comes with this experience, the dividends, like all the stuff Terence is talking about, the effects that those things can have on relationships, on your life in general. But I think when we talked about just like the number of people that have been lost in the system that we'll never know about, like we can't go back. I mean, Oregon has been talking about Measure 11 and repealing Measure 11 for the longest time. This is a thing that was used specifically to intimidate people into taking deals. It's mandatory minimum sentences, giving no good time for people who have maybe been charged with a first offense or a 10th offense, but it's done a lot of damage.
strike.
So we can't do that, right? We can't affect that. The people who win now, right? The people, if we take action as Oregonians and we influence change here, nobody wins, right? Nobody wins, you lose less.
Right.
It's like
That's a
everybody
great way.
loses less. This is not going to be
Right,
a
everyone.
paycheck. It's not like everybody's automatically getting some money for being inside.
Right.
It doesn't happen that way. It's
Right.
not what's happening.
Right.
We're talking about like restoring people to an opportunity for justice, whether that's a
That's
fair
it.
trial
Right.
or whether it's because they've done 13 years, 12 years, or 20 years,
Yeah.
and it's time to say, live
We're
your
done.
life.
Yeah.
Like, I get it that we
Punish
can
you
be
enough.
scared sometimes.
Yeah.
Like society can be scared, but we need to be a little bit bigger than fear right now. So I know, Michael, you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting point because, I mean, a lot of interesting contextualizing it, specifically because being able to return is essentially like even, and there's a lot that has been said about this, like the justice system is designed for this. And so that is, I guess, for people who are listening, who are learning through this process, actually never happened. But in this instance, it's like a possibility to a certain extent. But I did want to, so yes to that. So to raise up kind of Blue's comment that can be possible in at least this way, as we even reflect on a possibility for a restorative justice lens. But also really want to appreciate Terence for sharing that it strikes intergenerationally in a way that can never actually be repaired. And that is known, at least in some circles, that has been taking place for hundreds of years. And we know how it works. And also in this time of the pandemic and the uprising, that capitalism works in a certain way, and there's certain people who are benefiting from this, and they could fix it by, as mentioned, writing their name on a line. And the issue is that people are electively choosing to be indifferent or worse. And so I just want to thank all of you, but especially Terence and Blue generally for kind of like shaping it, but Terence for sharing your personal experience, because I do think, and that is like what I'm trying to work towards, is to raise up these voices, because ultimately I live a highly privileged life despite my lower tax bracket income status, or close at best. But these stories aren't mine, and I can't. Most of the work that I do is with young people because of the intergenerational, the necessary need to approach it from an intergenerational way. But I also am essentially tired of talking to adults because it requires a level of engagement where really 99% of the time people leave the conversation holding their beliefs where they started. And so it is these more complex conversations, and as Blue said, Portland is ready, and Terence said Portland's ready.
And I think it's more than Portland. I have to tell you, I always say this as like a joke, but I have a lot of people in my life that are not lawyers and don't know in detail that I spend most of my life in a prison and you know, all of that stuff. I mean, they know a little, but they're like, you know, my son's friends' parents, and they work and do all different things. And this issue, when I tell anybody, I mean, they're the, you know, they're all good people that don't want racism, and they're rather diverse crowd actually. And, but like, this is one of those things. This is one of those issues where this isn't just about, you know, how we've affected people, you know, that have non-unanimous jury convictions. this is like something that people hold really tight. They're right as a juror, right? And so even if we can't get people to think in the place of a defendant, right, which is very hard for most people, we can, people do understand this on the level of being a juror. Like, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean? They wouldn't care what I say, you know? And to me, that's a really interesting part of this issue. Like, when you tell anyone the same way I felt when I got here, most Oregonians that have been here their whole lives, that have no interaction with the justice system, had no idea that this existed until the last few years, you know? And that is what makes this issue, I think, really different than some other ones. It kind of checks all the boxes. It personally affects every single person who might ever sit on a jury. And so people can kind of get it in a different way than just like, hey, this affects defendants or the race issue. Like, it's so much bigger than that, right? And reasonable doubt. People watch movies. This is how it's supposed to be. And so I actually think I have never been anywhere where I've talked about this issue in communities all over the state, law students, everything. People get shocked and angry, and
Or they think
can't
you're
believe,
lying.
or they think I'm lying, right? They
No,
can't
that can't
believe
be.
it
Because it affects them too.
because it
right?
affects them too.
Even though it might be disproportionate, it
Yes.
affects you. If something happens and you not really allowed, I mean, now, yes, but from a juror to all the way to, in that time gap, nobody's really allowed that the system will work the way it is from an American heart point supposed to
be what you think it's supposed to be. My right.
It's not, has not been real.
Some people I know have told me like that if they did know about it, if they found out when they were on the jury, and they were like, "What?" You know. And we have this amazing woman who, her name's Cash, and she's spoken on this issue, and she was on a jury. She happens to be a woman of color, but what she's speaking to is both how she felt as a woman of color, but also how she just felt as a juror, as someone who didn't know that was the rule, and then to not be taken seriously. Or, you know, when you go into a room as a juror, and your job is to look at all the evidence, and basically fight it out. And the first thing every jury does, and this is just, you know, by habit, they do a poll. They say, okay, we're done with the trial. Let's raise our hands. Let's see where we are. We'll just start the conversation. Well, in Oregon, you start the conversation. Oh,
The
we're
first
done.
and last.
Bye. We don't even look at the evidence in most of these cases, right? So I think that it adds this other sort of dimension to this issue, where I really do think it's one of the few issues I have felt in the criminal justice system, and I've been doing this for like 25 years, like that people like wake up and they're like, wah, wah, you know, and they get so upset. So I think it's so worth trying to tell as many people as possible everywhere in the state. I don't think this is a like Republican Democrat issue. I don't think it's a black white issue. I think it affects all those things, of course, but I think it's really about, you know, it's about more than just defendants' rights or something like that. It's about the whole makeup of how we do justice.
You're supposed to be able to go in as a juror, right, and say, if I know in my heart or I have experience in this space that person is not guilty. You're supposed to have the confidence to say, I'm gonna stand with them, right? And that was it was supposed to be set up so that the one individual, right, could stand,
try to convince me,
to try to,
try to convince me.
and that's how we all think it works. It's like TV and movies, like they're gonna yash it out, and then at the end, that one juror shows everybody that actually you guys were wrong, and it's
or I'm not coming over to your side,
no matter what, because my convictions will hold to be.
And here's the evidence.
And here's the
evidence. What I think.
But that hasn't existed. And so when you talk about that, you're absolutely right, is that the whole concept of what it's supposed to be like, everybody was denied.
Everybody.
Every juror.
Every
that
juror.
was standing up for that individual. It's not about just protecting that individual. They actually lost their positioning as a juror. And that should have.
And that's why I say that the only way to fix this is the only way to create a system where moving forward, all people will trust it. I mean, that's a huge, right? Anywhere that's a huge ask. But this is one of the ones that so many people don't trust our system, whether they're defendant, family, whatever, whether they've been on a jury, whether they've just learned about this issue. The only way moving forward to have any, I mean, I'm a lawyer, right? I want people to believe in our justice system and I want to fight for it. I'm not just fighting for individuals and against racism. I'm fighting so we have a fair and just system. Because if we don't, like, what's the point, you know?
Yeah. I think when you think about this issue, think about it in the context of everything we've said, but then think about it if you're Terrence's wife, or if you're Eliza's son, or if it's somebody who you care about, who's still sitting behind bars, you know, on a situation like that. That this is real. This is humans' lives, you know, human beings dealing with this issue, and it's something that's, I think, winnable. I do. Like,
sure hope so.
I mean, that's
I
why
sure
we're
hope
fighting.
so.
That's
I'll
why
tell you what.
we have a whole group of
don't know.
people who have worked on this,
Yeah.
even to bring this to you today,
Yeah.
because we believe in
Our
it.
numbers are building. I mean, when I first researched this issue and published a law review article on it, like, it was really just me. And then I started working with my friends in Louisiana and we were kind of coordinating our stuff. And then they sort of took off on their campaign, which was really successful. And they filed cases and my clinic filed amicus briefs over and over and over to the US Supreme Court, begging them to take this case, you know? And at the 23rd try, the Supreme Court took the issue. And, you know, but I felt like obviously there's been people here, lawyers, defense lawyers especially, who have talked about the issue and tried to bring a case over the years. It was kind of like the bringing out the history, I think, and getting a lot of attention on that really started making people think about it a little bit more. And then what was happening in Louisiana. And now over the last year, we have like 50 community groups and we have just so many people paying attention. We have legislators paying attention. And, you know, I never fight for something I believe in because I'm sure I'm going to be successful. I mean, I feel like already what's happened is incredible. And I'm, you know, I should have just retired maybe
Took
on
the win.
April 21st, 2021, 2020. But I
Yeah.
feel like, you know, you don't fight for justice just because you're guaranteed to win. You fight for justice because it's the right thing to do. I'm a law professor. I have students that are entering the field as lawyers, and I want to show them that this is the path for your law degree. I mean, this is almost every law student comes to school to change the world. And you got to try. You have to try, and you will have many successes, individual successes, big issue successes, but you got to bring community in, you got to educate, and you got to be in the courts and in the legislature. You got to do all of it. And this issue has just brought all of it, and it's really it's incredible. So yeah, we're not giving up.
No, I think, yeah, we'll have one question, then we're going to wrap up. There is going to be a way for you to get involved in terms of signing petitions
Yep.
or sending letters. You
Yep.
can also reference more information on Still in Prison. It's under Zealous, ZEALOUS.
And I think it's stillinprison.org.
That's right.
And the petition is there and everything. And every petition, an email goes to the Attorney General.
Nice.
So Julia, you had a question?
Yeah, that was a perfect segue for it. So, you know, as people for mutual education, we want to mutually educate each other, but not stop there. And
Yeah.
the purpose is so that action will happen. And so I'm just curious, like, will you just go in a little bit more detail to what Blue just started saying? What are three things?
Yeah.
From varying degrees of like sacrifice,
Yeah.
commitment,
Yeah.
time, energy,
Yep.
three things that just like a human being that lives in Portland
Yep.
or outside of Portland
Yeah.
can do
Yep.
to move forward.
Great question. So yeah, for action items. So, you know, and this might evolve. I said, number one, check in with stillinprison.org because anything that needs to happen will happen there. But first, there is a petition that any individual can sign that, you know, their contact and their support of getting retroactivity for the folks with non-unanimous juries will go right to the Attorney General. So join us on that. That's number one. Number two, if people are involved in any organizations or groups or, you know, mom groups with their kids or anywhere where you have one or more people as an audience, it could be your friends, family, it could be more, you know, organized groups, show them about this campaign, show them the website, talk about the issue with them. I can't stress how important that is. Like even, this, and I, as Blue knows, I say yes to everything. I don't care that it's Sunday on Memorial Day, because this is how we've gotten this far. And obviously the social media and all of that. So learn about the issue, become outraged, because it affects all of us, as we've been discussing, and it affects so many people who are dealing with the repercussions, like both of you and your everyday life. But also there's people in prison, at least 200 people in prison that are also in need of retroactivity, that we can prove anyway. And then I guess third would be write your own letter, write a letter. People ask me all the time, write a letter to the Attorney General, tell her how you feel. You can do the petition, right? That's like you're signing on to something already drafted. But, gather a few people in your family or your friends and write a letter, and keep checking the website, because more things are going to happen. And it would be great if all of a sudden tomorrow this issue ended, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I do know that we are going to make the Oregon Supreme Court address these beautiful people and all the others. We're going to make them tell Oregonians that are convicted under this law that they don't deserve, right, to have a constitutional trial. And so this could be going on for a few more years until we get to the Oregon Supreme Court, if something doesn't happen before. So the more pressure we put on, the more we talk about this, the more you let people know that we had the system for 85 plus years. All those friends of yours, white people, all those friends of yours that in the last year all of a sudden want to become involved in racial justice issues, which, I mean, you all have like 30 friends, right, that are like, how can I be more involved? I mean, that's, this is how they can be more involved. This is an issue that is deep in Oregon's justice system, and we can dismantle, right, as the horrors of what this horrible racist law has done. We can, and help as many people as that we can count. So all those friends of yours, and I know we all have them, tell them about this, get them pissed off about this. You're
Thank you so
welcome.
much for
Sure.
both of you guys to be here.
Sure.
Thank you, everybody. Southeast Uplift, everybody that we thanked in the beginning, still thank you. And Tin Can Phone for putting this out into the world.
Yeah, that's amazing.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, I'm
Awesome.
sweating.
I know.
Everyone's sweating.
How did
Are you
get through this?
vaccinated?
No.
You're not?
No.
But I want to give you a hug.
Well, I'll put on the mask
Put on
and
your
you can
mask.
still hug me.
Why you don't get
I'm
vaccinated?
not letting y'all shoot me with nothing until
Why are you getting
y'all
vaccinated?
historically have not done well with us in that.
I know, but
I'm
you-
just waiting on y'all. Just give me, don't pressure me.
I know, but I want you.